I think before the event is often more important than the actual event. And that would be exactly the same with any sport. I think, it's the preparation, it's what you do in the lead up, and it's how you change the game in your head mentally.
Welcome to the Motorsports and Driver Development Show. My name is Catie.
And I'm Keto.
And today we are joined with British rally driver Catie Munnings. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for chatting to me. It's great to meet you both.
Yeah, you too. I just have to give a little shout out. The FIA Women in Motorsports Commission really made this interview come together, and we're super stoked. So just for everyone listening, if you don't already follow the work that's going on there, definitely check that out. It's super cool stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. So we're going to take it all the way back. And usually when I ask people how they got into rally, there's some funny story about stumbling into it. But I believe you were actually born into a rally family, right?
Well, yeah, my dad wasn't really rallying when I was born. So when he was in his 20s and his 30s, he was rallying at a small level. He never had the budget to do it properly. But he would be doing international stuff in Belgium, and he was really quick as well. And then he had kids, and then all the finances went, as we know. So what he basically did was he started working as an instructor at a rally school. So that was the Brands Hatch and London rally schools. He set those up. And so when I was probably, I don't know, I must have been about 5. I think I first went and sat in a rally car with him. And I absolutely loved it. I could barely see out of the windscreen. I was so tiny, and I was just looking up. I could just see the tree line. And I just thought it was the most exciting thing in the world. So that's probably when I got involved. And that was my first experience of rally. But he wasn't competing. And I've, my whole life that I've known him, he hasn't been competing. These kind of served as my coach when I got into rally when I was a bit older. But I definitely grew up around motorsport, because where I lived as a child, we had a family farm that was running a corporate entertainment company. So that was things like quad bikes and buggies and clay pigeon shooting. There was loads of land. So I was just out in old cars all the time. So it wasn't kind of competition motorsport family. It was more just us having fun and picking up some skills that way.
That's so cool. Does your family still have the farm and the events?
Do you know what? We don't have the events anymore. We still live in the same place at the minute. But we haven't. I think we've got maybe 1 or 2 quad bikes left over. But no, they're not running the company anymore. But they were probably up until I was about 16, something like that. So the good part of my childhood when I was learning to drive, I had plenty of resources around.
I love that.
So did you ever get to actually see your dad race, or by then he was retired?
No, and you know what? I think that's one of my wishes and one of my goals in life is to get him back in a rally car. I'd love to co-drive for him. I'd love to take him over. I think one of his favourite rallies is Ypres Rally in Belgium. So I'd love to go over with him and do that event. And yeah, I think I'd love to see him behind the wheel. He says he gets as much enjoyment from watching me now as he used to get when he was driving. But I know that if you love driving, it's a completely different thing, isn't it, when you're doing it yourself? So I think that's definitely on my bucket list.
That would be so cool. Does that mean that when you started expressing interest, he was really supportive, or was he like, oh, no, this is not a life you want to live?
I think there's probably always a bit of nerves when you talk about motorsport in a family, just because we all know how expensive it is. But actually, we didn't really kind of get involved thinking it would go into competition. The way that it started was me and my sister when we were about 14. He said he wanted us to do auto testing on the grass. And here locally, we've got a motor club, and it teaches you handbrake turns and tricks like that, and just car control. And he said he wanted us to do it because where we live is quite remote. So in the winter, the lanes can get quite icy and snowy, and he wanted us to have some handling skills. So we just used to do it for fun when we were about 14, all the way up till we started driving on the roads. And I got more and more competitive, and that's kind of how we got into it. It wasn't kind of me saying, Dad, I want to go racing, Dad, I want to go racing. It was more, I started doing it, and then I realized how much fun it was, and I loved the adrenaline, I loved the competition, and it went from there, really.
And how did you make the jump from not really being all about competition to now?
Well, do you know what? I think it all came together in the end. It's one of those things you look back on and it makes sense because I've always been such a competitive person. During that time I was at school and I was competing nationally in athletics as well. So I was doing heptathlons and I was training every day, and I had a coach, and we were competing at a high level, and so sports wise I had definitely had that streak in me, and I think that really translated into motorsport as well. But now I can't imagine not being competitive in motorsport. I absolutely love it. And the first time I sat in the rally car, I think I'd never driven any rally car before. And I went straight out to France. and I was testing with Peugeot Sport. I had an opportunity to come up with a French team, and it was literally off the side of Mont Blanc. So it was a really steep mountain. It was a gravel track. It was single file. And I was driving this left-hand drive car. Bearing in mind, I must have been just 17. I passed my driving test in England. But I was only used to driving right-hand drive on the right side of the road. And suddenly I was in France, and it was left-hand drive, and it was a sequential gearbox, and that so much was new about it. I remember being so overwhelmed, but the feeling of wanting to be able to tackle something and the challenge of it was what really interested me initially.
I'm curious about like the first actual competition event you did. It sounds like things sort of fell into place. Were you prepared for it? Did you just jump in and see what happened?
Well, yeah, it was a massive case of learning on the job. What had happened actually was I was in school and I was doing my A-levels at the time, so my final exams at school. And I was in a position where we'd been speaking to the European Championship. Just by chance, we'd been spectating at an event, and we were in a bar with one of the organisers at the end of the rally. And he was saying we need more women in motorsport. And my dad at the time was, he can, because he's been a driving instructor for years, he says that he can recognise if someone's got some talent or some skills and how to nurture it. And so he said, they were talking about it, and he gave us the contacts of a French team. And that was the kind of satellite Peugeot Sport team. And they were looking for a female at the time. They were looking for to get more women involved in motorsport, and they wanted somebody that was a beginner and that they could train up through their kind of Rally Academy training program. So I kind of felt that was how I got that first test with Peugeot. I kind of fell into the right time, and I walked away from that test, and we kind of decided, okay, let's try the European Championship then. And by that time, I didn't even have a rally license. So I think I only had a few months because it was the off season. So I had to do 5 rallies in 5 weekends or something crazy. And it was literally the last 5 rallies of the year in the UK. And this was to qualify for my license. So me and my dad used to go out. He'd be co-driving me, and I'd also be studying for my exams at the same time. So I'd be driving in a van across England, and I'd be reading the books in the back. And then, and I had to finish these events, because if I didn't finish, we didn't get the signature on my license. So it was more kind of surviving that stage of it. But the first event that I actually did, we decided would be Ypres Rally. So that was a year on from where we'd had that initial conversation with the organisers. And it also tied down, I didn't know this at the time, but actually it was coming in that it would fit in with my A-level exam. So it was literally on the same day in England. So the way that I had to do it was I'd test the week before out in Belgium with the team. And then I'd have to come home, sit my exam, because I live only kind of half an hour from the Channel Tunnel. So it's not that far to drive to Belgium from here. But what actually happened was I was testing and I crashed the car really badly, completely wrote the car off. Horrific conditions. It was really wet and really muddy, and we were on such a narrow road. And what I talked about earlier of not knowing my road positioning very well, switching to left-hand drive, my wheel was like this far on the grass, and it just spun us around, and we hit an electricity pylon, and we ended up completely writing off the car. And so we had to say to the team, okay, we're going to go back to England now. I've got my biology A-level tomorrow morning. You can fix the car. So the team fixed the car literally overnight. I came back and did my biology A-level. Then that afternoon, after the exam, I had to go back on the Eurotunnel straight across because I qualifying that afternoon in Belgium. It was the maddest experience of my life. Yeah, that exam, I was just not concentrating at all. I was so grateful to be alive. I'd just had my first rally crash, and it was so overwhelming, the whole experience. And then I finished the rally, and I was so excited to get to the end. I remember just being so excited that we'd made it and that we hadn't crashed again. I think that's probably still the most proud I've ever felt at the end of an event. It was just such a sense of achievement to get through that week.
Wow. And so did it get easier from there?
I mean, I think if you're looking for an easy sport, motorsport is definitely not the one, is it? But yeah, I mean, it wasn't so stressful, definitely. In the future, I had more time to prepare for events, and I didn't have to dart back to England in the middle of it. And then I went on, and I was in the European Championship for a couple more years, I think, before I decided to move to the World Championship this year. So it became like a second family for me. I love the championship, love the competitors, and such cool organisers as well. So yeah, really proud to be a part of that.
So your training, did your dad do most of the initial training, and from there did you get some other training, or has he been your main source?
Yeah, so I think because he was always like close to me, he would always be on the tests, he'd always be at the rally. So he was probably the one that knew me the best and knew my driving style the best. So he could pick up things quickly. When I first started with Peugeot, they kind of put me in with this French guy who was French national champion at the time. Really experienced driver, and he helped me a lot. He used to come along to my first initial testing days and would sit with me and would give me tips. I also started working with a really experienced co-driver, which really helps. She brought her knowledge of reading the road, and they always say in rally, to be fast you have to have good pace notes, so we really worked a lot on developing a good pace note system. So I worked with her. I'm hoping to start working with a new Latvian coach this year. I mean, obviously I haven't really been able to do much this year, but we're really trying to plan ahead to see what we can do for the rest of the year to hopefully get back out in the car.
That's so cool. You're talking about this weekend where you had testing and a crash and your exams and then a race. Talk to me about how you manage just your stress and your nerves and focusing. Like, I'm sure all race weekends have some element of uncertainty. How do you navigate all of that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, you always think the more you're in it, the less nervous you'll become. And it's never that way. I always shock myself with how nervous I get at the beginning of a race. And it doesn't matter how much preparation you do. I think that's a natural part of sport. But I think the way that you can manage it is what's really important. So I started working with a kind of sports psychologist. I only really had one session with him because I found that his tips still work to this day, and it wasn't something that I needed to kind of keep working on. First of all, he told me to read a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, which I really recommend. Such a good book. And it was kind of talking about, you've probably heard of your monkey mind and how not to get caught up in your thoughts. And it had some breathing techniques, but it would talk through tennis players. And it was sort of saying why tennis players always went wrong on the pressure shot at the end of the match. And, it was talking through the whole pressure environment in your brain and how it can affect your performance. And I started working with him and on some breathing techniques that can change like the composition of your body so you feel relaxed, which then tricks your mind to think you're relaxed, and then you feel relaxed. So it's kind of some good tips like that. So sometimes I just use them in my rally car. Another big one for me was visualization. So he literally downloaded, he made a video, which was, it's not a video, it's an MP4. So it's, no, MP3, the sound one, that's MP3, isn't it? Yeah. I always get confused. And it's basically, what he did was recorded the sound of the rally car starting in the time control before a race. So it's literally to the same speed. So you'll enter time control in rally, you'll hand your time card over, you'll have time to put your gloves on, you'll pull up to the start line, and then you go. And exactly to the right time, he prepared this audio for me, which is him talking me through how confident I am. It's like a trigger. So he was saying, you're putting your gloves on now, you can hear the engine, you're putting into first gear, and it's something you're meant to do when you're not on a race, so you'll be doing that when you're at home. And the trigger is putting your gloves on. So I'll literally be sitting in my bedroom and I'll put my gloves on, and for me, the way that with the timing that it works, he always says to imagine yourself in the most confident state so that you're really ready, really excited, and you're so prepared for the event. And putting your gloves on gives you that confident feeling. And then it's meant to be a trigger, so when you actually are in the rally car and you put your gloves on, you bring that confident feeling. It's the natural reflex, and it's all to do with the brain pathways and how you learn things and you develop. I don't really know the technical side of it, but it seems to work for me, so I go with it. If anything else, it's just psychological, I guess. But I think I started working on some techniques like that, and that helped me to control the unknown, and how to adapt to different situations. Because in motorsport, we'll be in the middle of nowhere, and the strangest things can happen. I remember one year we were in Rome, we were doing Rally Rome, and literally I think 2 hours before the event, our road car got broken into. We were waiting for the opening ceremony, and all of our pace notes were stolen. My co-driver's overalls, everything was stolen. So we didn't have any pace notes. Bearing in mind, we'd spent 2 days preparing for the event, making pace notes, driving around all the roads. And so she literally had to make pace notes from the sound of my voice on a GoPro video that we'd had in the car during the recce. So she was trying to really listen out to see what I was saying to rewrite these pace notes. And we literally had about an hour to do it before we were starting the rally that night. So I think when you're able to adapt and not get overwhelmed by those kind of situations, that's when it's really important in motorsport.
I'm overwhelmed just hearing that.
Yeah, wow, that would be.
I was gutted. It was awful.
Was it a fellow competitor trying to swim?
Yeah, that's the conspiracy. No, I don't think it was. We actually saw them. What happened was we were doing a parade in the city centre of Rome. So where the rally was actually in the surrounding mountains, about an hour from Rome. and that we were kind of going into the city. We were doing a city stage for the spectators, and then it was kind of a parade, and then we'd drive back. But where we'd parked was obviously quite a busy kind of touristy area of Rome, where obviously you've got people that are breaking into cars and stuff. Even though it was a public car park, there was cameras and everything, and we sat in the police station for ages. I remember my parents were there, so they sat in there for us while we were waiting to compete, and they were just like, well, it just happens. It's Italy, so
like, you can take my money, you can take everything, just don't take my pace notes.
No, I'm thinking, God, like, they took the weirdest things. I remember they took 6 liters of water as well out the back. I thought, why are you going to take that, you know?
So how'd the notes turn out, or did you just end up having to read the road a lot?
Yeah, I mean, that was the kind of thing for me, was to then trust my co-driver and trust what we had, because that's, you know, there's no point in doing an event if you're going to be half into it, because you just lose time so quickly. When you think each stage that we're driving is about 25 kilometers, and then you've got 16 of them over the weekend, and if you're constantly losing time because of that, you know, you're going to be minutes off by the end of the event. So that was the game for me. It was the mental side, and it was actually okay for us. I felt worse for my teammate, because his car, there were 2 cars that were still broken into, and his car was broken into, and he'd lost everything, including his GoPro. So he couldn't even listen back to the video from their recce to hear what they'd made, the pace notes they'd made. I remember he took my GoPro and tried to make pace notes from the pace notes that I'd made. When you think how different every driver is and how different they read the road and everything, you know, it was really tough. I mean, he actually crashed the next day. So we'll never know if it was due to the pace notes or if it was him trying to get some time back. But yeah, it was a really unfortunate event.
Oh, that's so crazy.
Yeah, wow.
So do you feel like the experience that you had as an athlete when you were younger is translating over into motorsports now?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. A lot of the skills are the same. I think it's the competition side. So it's the competitiveness and how you handle pressure in that moment. So I think before the event is often more important than the actual event. And that would be exactly the same with any sport. I think, you know, it's the preparation, it's what you do in the lead up, and it's how you change the game in your head mentally. And it was the same. I was goal shooter in netball at school. So it was always about getting it in. And it was, you know, that's a lot of pressure in itself as well when you think about it. But then I think a lot of it also in motorsport is uncontrollable by you know, unless you've got massive budgets that you can control yourself, which I never had. It was always kind of looking for sponsorship. And I think that side of it is slightly out of your control. You know, you can put the work in, but you have to kind of not get lucky, but, you know, but the opportunities have to be there for you at the end of the day. And I think a big part of it was just accepting that, you know, okay, I'll do everything that I can. And you have to kind of let go of the rest to kind of let it come into you a bit instead of just stifling it. I think that's the other thing that I had to learn as well. It's one of the skills that probably you wouldn't necessarily have in any other sport that doesn't have the same kind of financial input.
Yeah. So you mentioned sponsorship. How much of your time and energy do you spend either getting sponsors or fulfilling sponsorship requirements, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's a big part of the time, actually. I think it's more than people think, especially for motorsport. I know I keep saying that, but I think, you know, having spoken to athletes in other sports, they kind of don't have the same needs. They don't have to put the same into it. And I think especially in my first couple of years while I was trying to build a name for myself, it would almost be like a 90-10 ratio of me trying to find sponsorship compared to the actual driving. And that's still pretty much the case now. You know, motorsport, I probably drive still only like 10 to 20% of the time. The rest of it is all work that you do around it. It's not like, you know, I'm not a footballer. I can't just go and pick up a ball in the evening and go and play. You know, it's for me to practice. My team, you know, normally is in the south of France, but this year I've been with a team in Poland. So that's a long way for me to get to my car. If I want to test, we've got to close a road. There's got to be police. There's got to be ambulances. So it's, you know, it's expensive to do that as well. So we'll only have sort of one test day before an event in that location, and maybe we'll have 2 or 3 organized tests throughout the year around that anyway. So it's not a lot of the time. And I think then the more you kind of compete, the more sponsors you attract, and then obviously they kind of need something from you in return, which I love doing, to be honest with you. I really enjoy it. I get to travel so much. I get to meet so many cool people. I think working with Red Bull as well has been awesome for me, not from just kind of a sponsorship level, but more from the interaction that you have with some of the other athletes and the opportunities that they give you. I remember the day before my birthday last year, they phoned me and they were like, oh, we need somebody to go up in a stunt plane with one of our Red Bull flyers in Austria. Do you want to go up? And I was like, yeah, okay. So I was literally, I was on a flight, like a day later, I was on a flight out to Austria. I was in a stunt plane with one of the top stunt pilots over the mountains in Austria. And he was kind of doing a quick fire interview with me. And that was, just part of normal life for them. So, that was, you do get some cool opportunities, and then you get to bounce back kind of ideas from other athletes. And I think that helped me learn a lot about also the stress of being an athlete and the pressure, and what we were talking about earlier with how you handle it mentally. It's really interesting to get other athletes' opinions on that kind of thing.
Yeah. So what advice would you give somebody coming into it who, is looking to get some sponsorship to sort of move up? What would you say to them? How would you tell them to go about doing that?
I think always start with your local motor club. It's at the beginning, it's very much kind of use what you can get from people that you know. I know that people in local motor clubs are always keen to get the next generation involved, and I know that they'll be so supportive and give what they can and help you in any way possible. And even if it's just giving you a contact of somebody in a team that you can go and kind of hang out with or do some work experience with, or whatever it might be. That's kind of how I started speaking to people in my local motor club, and along with Dad, we kind of went to some events, and we kind of bought first rally car license. I think financially it's always a difficult one getting sponsors. I think especially after the pandemic now, I think it's even it's an even trickier place. But on the other side of it, it's a great platform. Motorsports, historically had such a cool history, and I think that will continue into the future. I think one piece of advice that I was given at the beginning was always make sure that you have an edge. So try and have something that nobody else has. For me, it was maybe a bit more obvious being a girl rather than, everybody else being guys predominantly that were going for rally budget. So I think it's always try and lean on something that makes you stand out from the crowd. And I'd say if you can develop that, whether it's if you're good on camera and good in interviews, you're really cool on social media, or you've got other sports that you can showcase as well. I think that's really cool to push that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
First of all, I do want to say your social media is very interesting. I follow you and I love it. I think you do a great job because you talk about kind of all the different sides of it, the fitness part, sort of what day to day looks like, the racing. I love it. You do a great job.
That's so good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would love for you to talk about your experience, not only being female, but being so young when you started. I'm sure you probably stuck out like a sore thumb. How did people receive you? Did you run into different challenges that other people maybe don't deal with?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was, it was a blessing. At the same time, I kind of didn't want it because I was kind of getting a lot more media attention. Being, for example, in my first event in IPA, I was getting a lot more media attention than perhaps I would have done if I was a guy, because it was like, it's a new female on the scene. What's she going to be like in her first event? Whereas if I was a guy, it probably wouldn't have been, there's a new guy on the scene. What's he going to be like in his first event? Because that's, pretty normal out there. So then all of a sudden, everyone was watching my first rally, and I was thinking, oh God, I need to go out and win the rally. But of course, that's not what happens. Everybody takes time to learn, the girls and the guys. And I think it probably cast me into the spotlight a little bit, which I didn't really want at the time because I just kind of wanted to learn under the radar. But at the same time, I then recognized, okay, without that, you don't know which sponsor's seen that news article or BBC Sport, whatever it was. So, you don't know how your opportunities come from that kind of exposure. So, I think it's a good thing inevitably. But at the time, I remember always saying like, oh no, I just want to go and do this without anybody knowing, or, without anyone watching me. I just want to learn and get fast and then go out into the world. But of course, that's not how reality happens, is it? You're kind of there. And if you're doing it, you've got to be, open to the fact that you are opening yourself up for criticism and for people's opinions as well.
Let's talk about that. I am sure you get criticism, although I frankly haven't seen any, but I'm sure it happens. How do you handle that, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I mean, I remember I watched an interview with the current world champion, and he was saying that, it doesn't matter. I mean, he's a world champion, so I don't think many people can argue with his talent, but he was saying you can read 1,000 comments on Instagram and they can be good, and there can be one that's bad, and which one are you going to remember? It's always going to be the bad one. And I think the first kind of bad negative comments that you get are always the ones that sting. I remember when I was competing, I had like somebody telling me, oh, stop driving, go and paint your nails, or go and make me a sandwich, and all of that kind of thing. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, but it was the first kind of criticism, negative comments that I remember exactly, I was driving home from that rally in Belgium, and I remember like literally I was sat on the Eurotunnel, I'd just been scrolling through and I'd seen it, and I was so shocked that someone would comment on somebody else's life and when they're trying to do something for themselves. I was like, oh my God. And I was so upset. I remember I was crying, and my dad was like, look, you can't be upset by it. People are gonna, everyone's gonna have an opinion, and these people haven't experienced what you've just experienced this week. They're just seeing it from how they're seeing it behind their screens. And I think once I'd really made myself like overcome that and, grow a thick skin, since then you don't get affected by the comments, because I will read them and I'll just sit there and I'll think, yeah, but I'm doing what I want to do and they're doing what they want to do. And so we can all just live our lives and not get affected by it. But I think it's very hard, especially when you're young, coming into motorsports, for those. But I guess, you're never going to control what everyone's putting out on the internet, and trolls are going to be trolls. But I think as long as you're happy and you're, going in the right direction and you're standing for what you believe in, I think, just keep doing your thing.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, the people who are commenting those negative comments are not doing what they want to do, and that's why they're commenting. They want to do what you're doing.
I think the point where I realized that those comments are more about that person, like they are so unhappy that they're willing to go and spew whatever they spew. Like that was a really big eye-opening moment for me. I'm like, okay, I understand. Sometimes people do give good feedback. There's a difference, but trolls will be trolls, as you said. So you have some pretty exciting things coming up on the horizon. Obviously, the world is kind of on pause right now. But aside from that, tell us what you're working on next.
Yeah, I was so excited for this year because it was the year that we kind of pulled up the courage and we stepped up and like, okay, Junior World Rally Championship next up, and we managed to get one event at the beginning of the year, but even then I can remember walking through the airport pulling like my headscarf off over my face and being like, oh God, no, is it gonna, I remember thinking coronavirus was a thing. We had it on the news in China when we were out there, so I remember walking around with this scarf up thinking, oh God, you never know. And I would never have imagined that we'd have got to where we got to now this year with lockdown and everything like that. So obviously it put pause on plans for this year for everyone, and I think it was probably quite good to have that time to kind of collect everything. Normally motorsport seasons, as can be like hectic and you can be all over the place and you don't have a lot of time to collect your thoughts and get back to the basics of it, so that was a positive. Also the esports training and the sim training was cool. I had a rig here where I was playing the WRC game as well, so that was pretty cool. We were running online competitions. I think for the future now, the way that we're looking at it is for this year, we're still, there's championship calendars have been published, but still kind of there's rumours that we're not really sure which events are going to run. And, it's quite a big commitment for the year. So I think what we're looking at is the way that we can get the most seat time as possible, whether that be through testing with a coach, maybe not necessarily, competing in all of the rallies, but kind of finding days when we can go and on our own accord arrange events so that hopefully they won't be cancelled. But yeah, I think for next year, I think we're kind of looking forward to that point, and that's where we're kind of working back from. We're seeing that as, okay, we want to start next year in the best position. We want to have as much seat time and be as fast as we can for the start of next year when hopefully things will be back to normal completely, and there'll be a proper JWRC season. So that's what we're kind of looking towards and getting all our sponsors on board for that. I think other than that, I'm really excited to be in the Driver Extreme E program, which is cool. It's good. It looks like a really cool championship. Electric SUVs, off-road in the most amazing places. I'd love to just visit as a tourist. So yeah, that's a cool thing to be involved in. I think especially during lockdown, we all became aware of climate change, all of these issues when we saw the world slow down and we saw the impact that had. I think that's a really cool, and it really opened my eyes to think, okay, this is really something we need to be thinking about in motorsport as well. So that's on the horizon. So yeah, all good things. Hopefully next year will be busy for us.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Extreme E program, isn't that is that a program where you have a co-driver and you guys switch back and forth too?
Yeah, so I think it got a lot of press recently because they announced that it was the kind of first series where the driver overall results, so the team result at the end of it, depended on the female's time and the male's time together. So it wasn't like I could win and then the male driver could come second. It was our combined time, and that was how we won the race. So each team has one male and one female. you'll do a lap and then you'll swap. So the male will co-drive female and then the male will drive. So it's, you've got to be good at both. And it's kind of off-road. I think they're doing one in Greenland, one in the Amazon and the Himalayas. So it's kind of going all over the place. And I think it will be great because it's giving women the same credibility in terms of results that males have had historically. It's not just choosing a woman to have a woman in the team and not really caring where they finish and, having it for kind of media purposes. Now it's kind of, the females that are going to be selected are going to be looked at for their, racing stats. And I think that's a really positive step forwards for women as well in motorsport.
Right. So most people that I know that are drivers have, how do I put this, a very difficult time being in the silly seat. How's that for you?
Do you know what? I think I've got used to it because that was the only way I could learn from teammates while I was kind of coming up through the rankings. I think the first couple of times I sat in the co-driver's seat, I was absolutely blown away by the speed. And, I think it always feels different when you're driving to when you're co-driving. You don't trust it as much. And I could never be a co-driver full time. I look at them in rallies and I think, gosh, don't you just want to get behind the wheel? But I think that's quite a good skill to have now going into this Extreme E, because we will be able to learn from each other. You'll be able to bounce off each other and where their strengths are. And I think having that experience of sitting in the co-driver's seat is really useful going forwards. I think some of the people that haven't done it before, maybe some of the track racers that come in and they haven't sat in the co-driver's seat before, it'll be so interesting to watch their onboard cameras from the first couple of tests because it is a massively different feeling. But I've got a little bit of co-driving experience, so hopefully that can give us a little bit of an edge. Although I'm not going to say that my face won't be the picture the first time I sit in the co-driver's seat of that as well.
Are you spending any time, or is everyone together spending time trying to brush up on their pace notes and their co-driver skills?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a funny one because it's always one where whenever there's been a co-driving opportunity as a driver, you always shy away from it because it's not where you want to be, if you're a driver. But now it's something you've got to put the time and effort into. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a funny one. I did a rally, was it last year? Yeah, in Monza in Italy. I was co-driving for a friend just at the end of the year. And I remember I had the watch and everything, so I could get all of that out. But yeah, it's a funny time at the minute because we're just hearing about all the championship plans and some of the rules are still being finalised. So it's really exciting to hear. And then the teams are picking drivers from the drivers pool. So every now and then you see a driver announced. So it is a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, so you don't know your team, right? I looked at the site and it looks like you're
no. Yeah, so also there's no kind of guarantee that you get picked from that. So the drivers pool is like a recommended pool of drivers that Extremely put together. And the way that it works is teams can contact you and pick you from that pool, but also they can pick any driver they wanted from all over the world. They didn't necessarily have to be from that pool. So yeah, it's massively open and I think it'll be very competitive because I think there's only 8 or 12 teams entered at the minute. So yeah, only 2 drivers in each. That's going to be hot seats.
Oh boy.
So these races that you do, is it more like stage rally or is it more like Dakar? I mean, you're racing through the Amazon and the Himalayas.
Yeah. I'd say it's like a mixed. Well, I don't know. I haven't seen any of the tracks because it's a new championship. But I think what it's going to be is a mixture between Rallycross and Dakar, because obviously it all seems pretty extreme and pretty off road. But I know that it will be in grids, so there's going to be qualifying and it's head-to-head racing. There's cool things like Formula E. There's power boosts and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, it's bringing that side of electric racing into it. But from what I understand, it is going to be. I would say it's very similar to Rallycross, but longer length. So I think this is where maybe rally drivers will have the edge because it's not just learning a circuit and learning a loop. It's you're going to get one pass of it when you're able to make your pace notes, and then you've got to drive flat out the next time, which is what we're used to doing rally. So I think that side of it will be useful to have that kind of muscle memory of learning a long stage by only one pass. But yeah, I think it's going to be it's going to be such an exciting championship for sure, and yeah, I think it will get a lot of coverage.
Wow. So you guys start more than one car at a time, like a bunch of you guys, like
yeah, I think it's 4 cars at the time, and they've got different heats of qualifying, and then they've got silly races and things like that as well. So there's a chance to qualify again even if you don't make it. So I think it's going to be really interesting for the fans to watch as well. We saw Formula E where they can vote for which team they want to have the power boost. I don't know if anything like that's coming in, but I think that's a really cool thing with electric racing that you can kind of control. And I know that, for example, in Extreme, one of the rules they've got is whoever has the biggest jump on the track gets a power boost. So it's going to be a lot of show boating, and it's going to be interesting to watch.
I'm like more excited about it now. This all sounds very fun.
Cool.
Are you at all involved in the planning, or do you just get periodic updates like, well, this is what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in touch with some of the organisers, so they let me know on what's kind of happening. I do some interviews with them, so I was doing some with like BBC Sport in England, talking about the programme and what it's like to be involved in it. So I'm kind of loosely involved, but not in terms of like haven't driven a car. I'm not kind of actively kind of working on the championship. But yeah, I think there's some rumours of some tests that will happen hopefully later in the year, so it'll be cool to be able to try out the car and yeah, hopefully get behind the wheel of it.
Have you ever been in an electric car?
No, I've never done electric racing. So I think that's really, other than like a hybrid hire car. I don't think we can compare it though.
Prius.
Electric is a new world for me. But I think one of the good things is that the teams that are entering seem to be mostly kind of Formula E teams or people that have got experience with electric racing. So I think that's kind of, hopefully it won't be too much of an issue. And, you know, we're taking that in. It will just be kind of learning how to drive it from a driver's side. But the teams seem to, you know, they've all got the experience and all the expertise that they'll be able to transfer from the track racing side.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I've driven an electric car. It's really hard because you don't have engine noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine, because you judge a lot. Like even if it's just when to shift up, that kind of thing, you judge from the sound of it, don't you?
Right. Yeah, and so then what you hear is a lot of the gravel and the wheel wells, right? That's when you know you're spinning tires, right? So that's great. So let me ask you another question about this Stream E. So I did a little reading up on it, and so you guys are going to be based off of a boat, a ship?
Yeah, so the whole point of it is to be kind of not polluting the environment. So in terms of flights and everything like that, I think there's only 5 people per team that are allowed to go. It's meant to be based from a ship, so that we kind of stay on the ship and sleep on the ships, that because the ship's being built in to be like an eco hotel, so it's, you know, it's sustainable. And it's also, I guess in some of those locations there probably won't be hotels. When we're in like an iceberg in Greenland, we'll be lucky for the ships there. So yeah, I think it'll be a massive adventure. I know that the ship's going to be the paddock, so the cars will be run out of that, and then they'll be transported around the world, and the teams won't be able to touch the cars in between races. So all of the teams are being built by Extreme E, so it's a lot more kind of neutral from that side. I think for then the next few years, there's plans to kind of develop the championship a bit more, so that teams can bring in their own kind of individual flares in terms of like the mechanics of the car. But I think for now, it's all pretty standard for the first year. But yeah, the ship sounds cool because it's also going to have a laboratory with scientists on it. And the way that it's going to work is, I don't know if you've read this about it, but for example, we'll race in like the areas of the rainforest, in Amazon that have been destroyed. So all the trees have been cut down, and, you know, it's just kind of a massive land now. We'll race over that kind of terrain. And then when we leave, the plan is for specialists in that area, I think they're from Cambridge University, are staying on to create programs to develop the land back up, to whether that's planting trees or like supporting the local economy or whatever it is for like the local people as well. It's meant to be regenerating the areas that we're in. And it's the same, for example, in the areas that have had tsunamis. It's meant to rebuild the houses and the buildings around there and things like that. So I think it's a really, really positive message, and it's really cool to bring that and to bring motorsports following and their kind of awareness to science as well, and combining that. And obviously, you know, as we just said earlier, it's so important now to think of the planet and to think of the future of everyone. So yes, it feels like a really interesting project, and hopefully I'll be on the grid.
Yes, it's like getting picked for kickball,
right?
Like out in the schoolyard. You're like, pick me!
Yeah,
I love it. Well, we will cross our fingers that you get picked for a team. I'm sure you will, though. I'm sure you will. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. Tell people where they can find you online and follow along with everything you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. It's Project Catie Rally, and that's spelled the French way with an E on the end of rally. I'm on Twitter as well, and I'm on Facebook. You can find me on there. I like using Instagram more, so that's probably more interesting for you guys to follow. It's like a little art gallery. But yeah, thanks for following me, and I'll keep you updated on there.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll have you back in 6 months, and we'll get updates on how everything's going.
Yeah, I would love to.
I look forward to it. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Me too.